Welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Thursday, January 16th, 2025, National Fig Newton Day. You either love them or you don't. And it's another huge news day. After his final speech from the Oval Office last night, President Biden delivers remarks today at the Department of Defense Commander-in-Chief farewell ceremony.
This will be my final address to you from the American people from the Oval Office, from this desk as president. And I've been thinking a lot about who we are, and maybe more importantly, who we should be.
That's how it started, and this is how it ended.
I'm so proud of how much we've accomplished together for the American people. And I wish the incoming administration success, because I want America to succeed.
In between that, there was some good stuff, some bad stuff, and the usual dividing of the country stuff. That speech came hours after he announced the Israel-Hamas ceasefire hostage release agreement, a complex three-part deal which is set to start on Sunday and potentially end the war in Gaza.
And I'm deeply satisfied this day has finally come, for the sake of the people of Israel and the families waiting in agony, and for the sake of the innocent people in Gaza who suffered unimaginable devastation because of the war.
We begin with coverage from Greg Kelly.
Peace is at hand in the Middle East. A deal worked out between Israel and those barbarian Hamas terrorists. Wow. Could it possibly have something to do with the new president about to take office here in America? Absolutely. Let's go through some of the highlights of the deal, though. First, what do we have here? We have a prisoner exchange, a 6-week ceasefire, 33 hostages released initially. This is going to be a phased approach. There are 3 phases in total, but this is how it starts. Let's go to the next slide, please. 600 trucks will be carrying aid into Gaza daily, and several Palestinian prisoners released. It's unclear how many hostages are actually in Hamas custody right now. A number of them have died, but we know a lot of them are still alive. Older people, children. It's absolutely horrific what they did. Dozens, however, are believed to be dead at this point, but dozens are alive, and American hostages are part of this. Here they are. American citizens held by the Hamas barbarians will soon be free. And you know why, right? President Trump winning the election on November 5th. That was awesome, and it changed everything. It changed the climate, the climate of the world, the mood of America, the business community, you name it. And President Trump making his own people, giving them power, giving them authority. You heard of Steve Witkoff? He's kind of like a Trump guy in New York. He's a builder. There he is playing golf with him, the guy on the right. They worked it out. He's the special envoy for the Middle East. He's been working this deal, and President Trump has been calling the shots and setting the parameters from back here. Last week, this was a message that I think would encourage our adversaries to get their act together.
That all hell must be paid if they don't release the hostages.
You know what that means, don't you? Well, do I have to define it for you? Look, all
No,
hell will break out. If those hostages aren't back, I don't want to hurt your negotiation. If they're not back by the time I get into office, all hell will break out in the Middle East.
Can you elaborate?
And it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone. All hell will break out. I don't have to say anymore, but that's what it is. And they should have given them back a long time. They should have never taken them. There should have never been the attack of October 7th. People forget that.
This is brilliant strategy, brilliant diplomacy, brilliant negotiation, and it works. And he's right about October 7th, right? October 7th, I thought that was a date that was going to live in infamy, but people forgot that Hamas terrorists took over a rave where there were mostly girls and their boyfriends, and they went in there with these crazy makeshift airplanes, gunships really, and killed women and children. How can that be forgotten? And then they did more. They took hostages, the elderly, babies, teenage girls. It's just insane. And the way they treated them, throwing them in the back of a pickup truck like they were cattle or something like that. You saw the man standing next to President Trump. That is Steve Witkoff. These guys go way back. And here's Steve kind of talking about what it's like working for President Trump on this project and the latitude that he gets?
I think it's the president, his stature, what he said he expects, the red lines he's put out there. That's driving this negotiation. I don't know anyone who delegates better than President Trump. He gives us a lot of authority to speak on his behalf, and he exhorts us to speak emphatically. And emphatically means you better get it. You better do this.
You better do this. Can you think of, Tony Blinken or Jake Sullivan saying, you better do this? No. It took a New Yorker, by the way, Wickoff and President Trump. And these negotiations were happening in Doha, Qatar, and they go into effect when? This Sunday, January 19th. That name, that date mean anything? It's the day before Inauguration Day. President Trump becomes president on January 20th, and we have a deal in this Israeli-Hamas conflict that goes back to October of 2023, 400-something days. You think the timing is coincidental? Of course not. You know what it reminds me of? January 20th, 1981, when our hostages got back. They left Iran at the moment President Reagan became president. How about that one?
That is Greg Kelly, and that is simply amazing. The Iran hostage crisis under President Jimmy Carter, who couldn't secure their release, lasted 444 days. As Greg said, they were released on the day of Reagan's inauguration in 1981, cementing his reputation that lasts until today as a powerful leader. And Jimmy Carter just passed away, and Biden just gave his eulogy. The Hamas hostages, including several Americans, and we still don't know for sure how many are alive, have been held hostage for 466 days. And some of them, 3 females, according to the deal, will be released on Sunday, the day before Trump's inauguration. More in the days after that. This is Rob Schmitt.
Laughably, today we got to watch Joe Biden jump on television and try to take credit for this.
George Mitchell, who did so much to forge peace in Northern Ireland, once said about diplomacy, he said, it is 700 days of failure and 1 day of success. 700 days of failure and 1 day of success. Well, we've had many difficult days since Hamas began its terrible war. We've encountered roadblocks and setbacks. We've not given up. And now, after more than 400 days of struggle, a day of success has arrived. I've worked in foreign policy for decades. This is one of the toughest negotiations I've ever experienced. And we reached this point because of the pressure.
Hundreds of days of struggle to find 1 day of success. He's trying to allude to other negotiations that have taken this long to make you think that they're the reason that this got done. It just took 466 days. In truth, this would have taken thousands more days if something hadn't changed. Just imagine Tony Blinken sitting there apologizing to Hamas for another 4 years until the hostages inevitably died. That's what it would have looked like if Kamala Harris would have won. At the end of Biden's speech today, he was given one final question that said everything.
Brooks, credit for this, Mr. President, you or Trump?
Is that a joke? Oh, thank you.
Is that a joke? No, your administration is the joke, sir. So clearly. Biden's State Department today claimed Trump's team was critical to the negotiation. They actually went out and said that Trump's team was critical in this negotiation, but only because, in their interpretation, they're the ones that are going to have to continue to live up to this agreement once taking power. Take a listen to this.
When it comes to the involvement of President-elect Trump's team, it has been absolutely critical in getting this deal over the line. And one of the things that we have always said about this deal is that when you get from stage 1 to stage 2, that the United States, Egypt, and Qatar are the guarantors of this deal. And Egypt and Qatar will push Hamas to stay at the bargaining table and to get from stage 1 to stage 2, and the United States will push Israel to stay at the bargaining table to get from phase 1 and phase 2. So obviously those are promises we cannot make on behalf of the United States for any longer than the next 5 days.
That's why Trump was critical to the negotiation in his distorted mind. But let them have their delusions, of course. There's only 5 more days of this lunacy, as we all know. As far as the strength of the deal, that Biden and Tony Blinken crafted for more than a year. It's being lambasted. The head of the Zionists of America writing, "It is heartbreaking and infuriating and frightening that Israel's government is agreeing to this deal and that the U.S. pressured them to do so," in which initially an estimated 1,000 Palestinian Arab terrorists and later 2,000 more Arab terrorists, many who have murdered Jews, will be released for only a tiny fraction of the hostages or dead bodies. Remember, this is exactly why they took all of those hostages. This is exactly why, because they know you can get 30 for one when you've got people like Tony Blinken in charge. Senator Tom Cotton writing, "Why is lame duck Joe Biden trying to cram down a bad deal on Israel on his way out the door? The only deal should be unconditional surrender by Hamas, which is already nearly destroyed, and return of all hostages. Here's the deal to offer Hamas and its patron Iran. You have 5 days to release all the hostages, or we unleash hell."
Newsmax host Rob Schmitt with the words of Senator Tom Cotton. Again, this is a multi-phased, complicated deal with a lot of moving parts and will be the focus of most news shows again today. Greta Van Susteren, who spent time in Israel after the October 7th attack when the hostages were taken, spoke about it with former deputy mayor of Jerusalem, who says the only reason there is a deal is because Donald Trump is about to take office. And then we'll get into the Senate confirmation hearings yesterday, and I'm going to revisit an interview that I had with Pam Bondi back in 2020 during the election and COVID. She was working as a Trump advisor then. Here's Greta.
Some people are celebrating this, and I'm thrilled for the families of the hostages who are coming home alive. We don't even know which ones are alive. We don't know what kind of condition they are in because they've endured the unthinkable for 467 days. There still remain others. And I must admit, looking at it, it makes me still so angry at Hamas, the United Nations, the college students who are protesting here, even Qatar, who gave a safe haven to Hamas as he celebrated and cheered on October 7th. So, it just reignites my anger, which I should have had 467 days, but there have been days when I've concentrated on other stories. But this is just the worst. But your thought?
Well, it's a Sophie's choice, Greta. What can I tell you? You have people who are going to be seeing their loved ones over the next few weeks, and you have people who don't even know if the second phase of the plan will happen or if they'll ever see their loved ones. There's also no guarantee when they talk about the 32 hostages, how many are alive and how many are dead. There's an estimation now that 23 out of the 32 are alive. But again, this cruel psychological warfare that we really don't know what's going to be happening within the next few days. And we really hope and we pray that Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization that started this whole thing, will actually keep to the deal. And let's not kid ourselves. The only reason they've reached a deal now is because they know that under Trump it's going to be a lot harder for them to manage whatever it is they want to continue managing in the Gaza Strip.
Hamas is just, they're evil, they're cruel. Anyone who supports them, anyone who has been giving any aid or comfort to them are equally as bad. And I remember speaking to Prime Minister Netanyahu over a year ago, and I agree with him that, you have to destroy all of Hamas because they're just going to regroup. But I certainly understand just to get these hostages home, this few. I mean, Hamas won't even return them all, won't even give them all of them up. I mean, it's just, it's the idea of having a boot on your throat, having to deal with this horrible organization and the world. And many in the world are just appeasers to them.
A lot of appeasers, a lot of people who've normalized what they've done, a lot of people who make an equivalency between innocent hostages, including a 2-year-old baby, a 6-month-old baby, and the prisoners with blood on their hands, 1,000 of them, that we have to give in order to take our civilians and bring them home. And people make equivalency. The hypocrisy of the world to normalize this terrorist organization. There are some media outlets, Greta, who won't even call them terrorists, like the BBC. And so it's disgraceful. And what's even more disgraceful is that we hear from Antony Blinken a week ago saying that it was Hamas who was intransigent, who didn't want the deal up until now. And the daylight between Israel and America is what made them be more intransigent. And who created the daylight, if not the Biden administration? Pushing Israel not to go into Rafah, threatening us not to sell us the weapons we needed to finish the war. It was that daylight that occurred in this administration that made them intransigent.
Again, that's Fleur Hassan, the former deputy mayor of Jerusalem and current Israel special envoy, on the record with Greta Van Susteren, 6 p.m. Eastern on Newsmax.
The partisanship, the weaponization will be gone. America will have one tier of justice.
That's Pam Bondi, President-elect Trump's pick for Attorney General in yesterday's Senate confirmation hearing. She was pressed over and over again by Democrats that are terrified President Trump may target them.
We're also worried about Liz Cheney, Senator.
The president has
You know
called
what we
for
should
this.
be worried about?
Ms. Bondi,
the
please
crime rate
answer
in
my
California
questions.
right now
You are
is
aware
through the roof.
Carl Higbie, the host of Frontline on Newsmax, breaks it down for us.
So they put Hegseth first because they thought he'd be the most controversial, and then they had Pam Bondi second because they thought that she'd be the most impactful. They also had Marco Rubio today, and we'll get to him in a minute. But this hearing today for Pam Bondi had the most hypothetical questions you could possibly imagine. More than I thought, actually, because Pam Bondi is under oath, and Democrats want to hold her to any statement she makes once she's confirmed, because she will be confirmed. But Ted Cruz summed up this entire hearing in his opening statement.
I thought the exchange just a moment ago with Senator Hirono was illustrative. She asked you how you would respond if the president asked you to target his political enemies. It's rather striking because it's not a hypothetical. It has happened over the last 4 years. And I think perhaps the most tragic legacy of the Biden-Harris administration has been the politicization and the weaponization of the United States Department of Justice.
Full display here. And if you don't think they did that, consider a CAT scan. Democrats wholeheartedly supported the weaponization of the justice system. They just did. And now they're worried about it being done to them, starting at Russian collusion. And I fault Jeff Sessions early on for this, who was Trump's first attorney general. Robert Mueller looked into Donald Trump for Russian collusion for the bulk of his presidency, and there was no proof, nothing whatsoever. And I can say with a reasonable degree of certainty, folks, that they probably knew it wasn't true when they started the investigation. The irony is that the people investigating Donald Trump for that, one of them actually went to jail for actual Russian collusion himself. You cannot make this stuff up. Look, I don't have to tell you all the instances, but they raided Donald Trump's home at Mar-A-Lago illegally with a prosecutor who was illegally appointed, which got the case thrown out. They put people in jail who weren't even at the Capitol on January 6th. The DOJ assisted in state prosecutions that they're not supposed to be involved in. They've all fallen apart like Fani Willis's. They dispatched senior DOJ employees to work in the Manhattan DA's office to, get Trump. Hell, they put a guy in jail for a meme. The left is worried that Pam Bondi is going to do to them exactly what they did to Trump and his people. The only difference is Democrats seem to have actually broken the law, and there's this little pesky thing that Democrats didn't have on Trump, which is evidence. What they're worried about is that Pam Bondi is going to go after Jack Smith for his bogus investigations, Liz Cheney for conspiring with a witness to change her testimony outside of her attorney's representation, and the rest of the J6 committee for deleting evidence, and even Merrick Garland for allowing all that to happen.
Senator Hirono, I wish you had met with me. Had you met with me, we could have discussed many things and gotten to know.
I am listening to you now. Could you respond to the question?
Yeah, you were the only one who refused to meet with me, Senator. But what we would have discussed is that it is the job of the Attorney General to
I'm very
follow
happy to listen
the
to
law.
your responses under oath, Ms. Bondi. I'm just asking whether you would consider Jack Smith,
Senator,
to be one of the people. How about Liz Cheney?
Senator,
how about Merrick Garland?
I am not going to answer hypotheticals.
And the Democrats that are the most worried about this are likely the ones who involved. You know what was so interesting, actually, too? And I just realized that so many Democrats yesterday were complaining that Pete Hegseth didn't meet with them prior to the hearing. I mean, I wouldn't have wasted my time either because they were never going to vote for me. But they just complained about not meeting, which is crazy because one of the Democrats, that woman you just heard, Mazie Hirono, she just said she refused to meet with Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi requested a meeting with her, and Mazie didn't take it. I understand Republicans not meeting with somebody who's never going to vote for them, but this just shows me The fact that Mazie Hirono didn't take the meeting, and Pam Bondi called her out for it, which is great, but that her opposition has nothing to do with qualifications or reality. It's purely partisan. It's like the left is going to oppose anyone Trump nominates for any position, even like dog catcher, because they know there were a ton of legally dubious actions under this reign for the last 4 years. Democrats were 100% convinced that their lawfare was somehow going to keep Trump out of office, that they were willing to gamble in what seems to me was breaking the law in order to do it. And in some last-ditch effort, they try to make Pam Bondi into some like conflicted foreign agent from Qatar. We went from Russia to Qatar now.
You did not list your current position as a partner at the lobbying firm, nor the work you've done for your Ballard partner clients, such as lobbying for the country of Qatar for $115,000 a month, and for corporate giants Amazon and Uber when you were asked about conflicts of interest. Why do you believe your work as a lobbyist does not constitute potential conflicts of interest?
Well, Senator, first, that was the amount my firm received. I believe multiple people represented the country of Qatar within my firm.
This is rich, considering a fellow member of Dick Durbin's Democrat Party, Robert Menendez, had to step down and is being charged in part for ties and compensation that he did not disclose, partially from Qatar. At least Pam Bondi registered and disclosed her actions, which is compliance with the laws that people like Dick Durbin wrote. You don't like it, Durbin? Change the law.
That's Newsmax host Carl Higbie. Democrat Senator Richard Dick Durbin is the same guy that said this.
There's a fixation on the Biden family by many Republican leaders, and I think there are other issues that are more relevant and important in the lives of ordinary Americans.
He doesn't see why Republicans or any Americans would be concerned about not only Joe Biden taking money from adversarial countries, but the whole Biden family. That's not important. Pam Bondi's law firm in Florida has a contract with Qatar. Reminder, she does not work for the federal government yet, and her father isn't the president. So who exactly is Pam Bondi? What is her background, aside from graduating from the University of Florida in Gainesville and then getting a law degree from Stetson University, a fancy, expensive private school about 45 minutes north of Orlando?
From the moment I interned at the state attorney's office in Tampa, Florida, all I wanted to do was be a prosecutor. The Supreme Court certified me, and I had 4 jury trials while still in law school. Lost most of them, but had 4 jury trials and never wanted to do anything else. I continued my career there, trying everything from DUIs, domestic violence cases, capital murder cases, the whole gamut. I became a lead trial attorney in courtroom every day, trying career criminals, was deputy chief of a division, and then ultimately was felony bureau chief, and eventually left to become Florida's 37th Attorney General for the state of Florida. Nothing has impacted my career more than my experience as a state prosecutor, because I got to know and still keep in touch with many victims and their families from when I was a prosecutor. Upon becoming Attorney General in 2011, I proudly served for 2 terms. I was term limited. I would probably still be there right now had I not been kicked out of office by term limits. I loved being Attorney General. I did my best to keep Florida safe, to continue to stand up for victims of crime, and to fight the opioid crisis and the drug crisis that was not only facing Florida, but this entire country. Out of the top 100, this is one of the things I'm the most proud of, oxycodone dispensers in the entire country, I believe it was 98 of them, 90 or 98 of them, lived in Florida. We fought for tough legislation. Kids were dropping dead every day. We fought for tough legislation, and after that legislation, none of those opioid dealers, doctors, practiced in Florida. We fought to eliminate human trafficking by raising awareness and prevention and talking to parents and talking to children. We also provided critical resources, including safe houses, that my state was lacking. On the civil side, we worked to protect consumers. We tackled everything, including off-label prescription marketing, which affects, as you know, many, many people who can't afford prescriptions as well. We partnered with states' attorneys general from both parties and federal agencies across administrations. We went after price gougers during hurricanes. If confirmed as the next Attorney General of the United States, my overriding objective will be to return the Department of Justice to its core mission of keeping Americans safe and vigorously prosecuting criminals. And that includes getting back to basics: gangs, drugs, terrorists, cartels, our border, and our foreign adversaries. That is what the American people expect, and that is what they deserve from the Department of Justice. If confirmed, I will do everything in my power, and it will be my great responsibility to make America safe again. Making America safe again also requires reducing recidivism. We have to fix the Bureau of Prisons, and I am looking on both sides of the aisle. The Bureau has suffered from years of mismanagement, lack of funding, and low morale. I was proud to support President Trump's First Step Act. I think more can be implemented and more can be done on that front. President Trump's leadership on criminal justice reform has demonstrated what is possible when a president is unafraid to do things that have been deemed to be too difficult. We have to reach across the aisle and get solutions for all of these problems. Like the president, I believe we are on the cusp of a new golden age where the Department of Justice can and will do better if I am confirmed.
That's Pam Bondi in her opening statements yesterday. And let's go to National Report with special guest Florida Congressman Byron Donalds.
If I can focus on Senator Rubio just for a moment here, Politico put out an article saying there should not be any issue with Rubio, as you stated, getting confirmed. But he will go through this process. But Politico reports he won't last long in a Trump administration. Would you disagree with that?
I disagree. I mean, look, Marco, number one, there's few people on Capitol Hill with as much foreign policy depth of knowledge than Marco Rubio. That's number one. Number two, he and President Trump have a great relationship. This is very different from 2016. I know in 2016, the president nominated an initial cabinet. A lot of people rolled out pretty quickly. Donald Trump has had an opportunity to actually be away from the White House, away from the presidency. So these picks are not just who is in front of him. This has been well thought out for quite some time. The people signing up for these jobs, like Marco, like Pam Bondi, they know who Donald Trump is. He's no nonsense. He has an agenda. If you're not getting the job done to his specifications, you're out of there. Let's everybody get on the same page. They know this. So I think for Marco, he's going to do a great job. He's going to be around for a while. I mean, nobody ever tells a nominee, except if you worked for Joe Biden and all his nominees, quite frankly, were pitiful, that you're going to be around for all 4 years. That is typically not the case. But don't expect to see what we saw in the first Trump administration in this administration. Yeah. The people coming in, they know the score, they know the plans, they know the detail, and a major credit to President Trump and his team for going through the vetting process before they made these nominations. I think Marco, like everybody else, is going to do a great job.
Congressman Byron Donalds, who you may recall was a potential VP pick for President Trump and is likely to be named as Senator Rubio's replacement in the Senate by Governor Ron DeSantis. In 2020, I spoke with Pam Bondi on my then radio show about the 2020 presidential campaign and the pandemic. She was working for President Trump as an advisor at the time. Pam Bondi, our former Attorney General, now advisor to the Trump campaign, is with us. Thank you for checking in, and how have you been?
Hey, Hey, Tony, I'm doing great. I hope you're all being safe in Orlando as well.
Thank you very much. We are all trying to be as safe as we can. Hope you are as well. President Trump just wrapped up his coronavirus task force briefing, as you know. And we know that the president halted travel from China and then from Europe and helped New York and other states tremendously. But as you know, Pam, there are people that now think the administration could have done a better job with this whole pandemic. And not that we believe the polls, but we are seeing it in the polls right now.
Well, you know, we were behind in the polls in 2016, and look how it worked out. I mean, we're not worried about the polls. We never have been worried about the polls. President Trump is doing everything he can to fight COVID-19, and he'll continue to do that.
Many pundits feel like this is the best thing, the pandemic, that could have happened for Joe Biden's campaign, because he doesn't have to go out and do any public events and do any public speaking, and virtually, you know, he can sort of manipulate everything. Do you agree?
He's not saying anything. He's only doing press conferences through a teleprompter. He's answering questions that are scripted, and he's answering them through a teleprompter is what I've seen so far. You know, and back to COVID-19, President Trump is out there, as you said. He just did a press conference. The United States has completed more tests than any other country on the earth. We performed over 47 million tests, and, you know, this virus came to us from China. And, the case mortality rate in the U.S. is lower than the EU's. It's lower than the world average. It's bad. We know it's bad. And President Trump is doing everything he can to stop it.
So the Democrats, we know, you know, this is what they're going to use as their main talking point. This is their weapon. Is defunding the police going to be the president's main talking point, other than the economy, obviously? We're already seeing the president's commercials on defunding the police. Is this going to be his main argument against Joe Biden?
Well, I think the president's record the last 3.5 years is going to be his talking point. I mean, everything he's done for our economy throughout the country. And, you know, he's already created $50 billion by cutting regulatory costs. He's going to boost households $3,100 annually in coming years. That's all thanks to President Trump. And, you know, what did Joe Biden say? $2,000 a month is irrelevant or not consequential for each household. Well, that's a lot of money to me. I think it's a lot of money to you and most American families. I mean, the president's deregulation, everything he did there is very, very important, and everything he's done for Florida. You know, he brought 593,000 jobs to our state, and 29,000 of those, by the way, were new manufacturing jobs. So that, and of course, fighting COVID-19. I mean, we're living in a world in which we've never lived, nor any of us ever expected to. Don't you feel like we're in an alternate universe, Tony, sometimes?
Oh, it's
right.
Just amazing what we're going through now. And on the heels of your administration as the Attorney General and Governor Rick Scott, now Senator Rick Scott, along with President Trump, our state has grown tremendously, and our economy has grown tremendously.
Tremendously. And you know, this is going to be the great American comeback, and President Trump did it once, and he will do it again. And, you know, in February, before COVID hit, unemployment was at 2.8. That's unheard of. You know, and during the Obama presidency, it was over 3 times as high almost. It was at 8%. What President Trump has done once after COVID, he will do again. And as far as law and order, yes, he's a law and order president. And as a career prosecutor, I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud that he is the law and order president. And, you know, we're so blessed to live in Florida, by the way. We're not seeing what they're seeing in New York, Chicago, Portland, Seattle. You know, last night alone, you saw what was happening in Portland and Chicago. It was horrible. All of the deaths, everything that was happening, horrific babies being killed. And, you know, whether Joe Biden wants to use words about redirecting funds to mental health or EMS or different areas, or the left-wing radical media, who he's in bed with, as Bernie Sanders and everyone else, saying they want to defund the police. We can't do that in our country. You know, as a career prosecutor, that's crazy to do that. We all know that. And
all right, part of an interview I had with former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi in Florida back in 2020. Then she went on to talk about, a lot of Florida-specific stuff pertaining to the pandemic and Governor DeSantis and stuff you wouldn't be interested in hearing right now, especially if you don't live in Florida. That was not too long after her tenure as Attorney General in Florida, and she was working for the Trump campaign then as an advisor. Now she is on the cusp of becoming the United States Attorney General under President Trump. Quick side note, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin space company did successfully launch its Glenn rocket around 1 o'clock Eastern this morning from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station after being scrubbed several times. It's sort of a big deal because Blue Origin, which was doing those tourist space flights, is now going to compete or attempt to compete with Elon Musk's SpaceX in bringing satellites into orbit for other companies, for the government, and cargo into space as well. On Wall Street, stock markets were well into the green this morning after closing sharply higher yesterday. Finally, the Dow Jones Industrial Average up more than 700 points yesterday. All right, be sure to keep up with all of the news, and there is plenty of it, and breaking developments as well. There will be plenty of those throughout the day on Newsmax, N2, and Newsmax.com. It all begins each and every day with Wake Up America. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you for listening to the Newsmax Daily. Enjoy the rest of your day, and keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Relentlessly slowing the spread of the stupid every day. It's the Rob Carson Show.
Hey, it's Rob Carson. My podcast is about leading-edge commentary and opinion, great guests, and the biggest political comedy in the country. My satire was featured on the Rush Limbaugh program for over a decade, and now it's fresh and new and on my podcast. It's not just another desk-pounding conservative tirade. It's about entertaining, informing, and motivating. Patriotism and hope. You don't need more stress in your life. You need to feel good and, dare I say, even laugh. Subscribe and download at your favorite podcast platform or go to Newsmax.com/listen.
Information. Truth. Is freedom. Is Newsmax. It's real news for real people.